What if the biggest, most important lessons you could ever learn in life could be boiled down to just 3 simple stories? Well, today, we're going to do just that. We're diving into the wisdom of Steve Jobs, from one of his most legendary speeches ever, the one at Stanford, that honestly continues to inspire millions of people to this day.
So here's the question. Can 15 minutes really change your life? Steve Jobs thought so. He believed he could share a lifetime of wisdom in that short amount of time. And how did he do it? By telling 3 stories. Just 3 stories that pretty much defined his entire journey. So let's break them down.
All right, here's the game plan. It's all built around his 3 stories, right? First up, connecting the dots. Then we'll get into love and loss. And after that, his really deep thoughts on death. And of course, we have to wrap it all up with that famous final message, stay hungry, stay foolish.
Okay, so let's jump into that first story, connecting the dots. This one is all about trust. Having faith that all those seemingly random, sometimes confusing, even the really tough moments in your life, that they'll eventually somehow weave together and actually make sense.
So where does this idea come from? Well, it all started with a decision that honestly would terrify most of us. Jobs was at this super expensive college, and he was basically watching his working-class parents' entire life savings just vanish. And after only 6 months, he felt totally lost. He just couldn't see the value. The college wasn't giving him any real answers for his future. So he made this huge choice, one that looked like a massive failure to everyone. He dropped out.
Now, life as a dropout, it was anything but easy. I mean, get this. He didn't have a dorm room, so he was sleeping on the floor in his friends' rooms. He was literally returning Coke bottles for the 5-cent deposits just to get money for food. And every single Sunday, he'd walk 7 miles across town to the Hare Krishna temple for one good free meal a week. But in all that struggle, he found something he didn't expect: freedom. See, with no required classes to attend, he was totally free to just drop in on whatever actually interested him, whatever sparked his curiosity. And one of those classes he dropped into? Calligraphy. Now, at the time, this had absolutely zero practical application for his life, but he was just captivated by it, by the art of beautiful type. Okay, now, fast forward 10 years. Jobs is designing the very first Macintosh computer. And what's one of the key things he builds into it? You guessed it, everything he learned in that useless calligraphy class. That's the dot connecting right there. The Mac became the first computer ever with beautiful, multiple typefaces. And get this, because Windows pretty much copied the Mac, that one seemingly random class is the reason pretty much every personal computer today has elegant fonts.
And this all leads to his main point, summed up in this incredible quote. You can only connect the dots looking backward. You have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. Think about that. You just can't see how things are going to line up when you're looking ahead. It's impossible. You have to trust in something, call it your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever works for you. You just have to believe that the dots are going to connect down the road. And it's that belief, that trust, that gives you the confidence to follow your heart even when it leads you off the well-worn path.
That whole idea of trusting your path, it leads us right into the second story. And this one is about 2 things that pretty much define the human experience: love and loss. Specifically, it's about how loving what you do, truly loving it, is sometimes the only thing that can pull you through a really, really devastating public failure. 30, just 30 years old. That's how old Steve Jobs was when he got fired. And not just from any job, he was fired from Apple. I mean, let that sink in. The company he co-founded in his parents' garage, the company he'd built into a $2 billion giant with over 4,000 employees, and they kicked him out.
Just try to imagine that. The thing that defined his entire adult life was just ripped away from him. And it wasn't some quiet little departure. Oh no, it was a massive, public failure. He said it himself. I was a very public failure. And I even thought about running away from the valley. He was so shattered, he literally thought about just leaving Silicon Valley for good.
But then, slowly, as the dust started to settle, he had this realization. He still loved what he did. The passion, it was still there. And getting fired, as horrible as it was, actually did something amazing. It replaced the heavy weight of success with what he called the lightness of being a beginner again. And that feeling of freedom, it unleashed one of the most creative periods of his entire life. In the next 5 years, he starts a company called Next, and another little one you might have heard of, Pixar. And then, in this amazing twist of fate, Apple ends up buying Next. And just like that, Steve Jobs is right back where he started, leading the very company that had fired him.
So what's the big takeaway from this incredible roller coaster? It's this. Sometimes life is going to hit you in the head with a brick, hard. But you can't lose faith. Jobs was absolutely convinced that the only thing that kept him going was that he loved what he did. So his advice to all of us is pretty direct. You've got to find what you love. And if you haven't found it yet, keep looking. Don't settle.
All right, that brings us to the third and final story. And this one might be the most profound of all. It's about death, and specifically how remembering that you are going to die is maybe the single most powerful tool you have for making the big, important choices in your life.
He had this quote that he lived by. If you live each day as if it was your last, someday you'll most certainly be right. And he took it literally. For 33 years, he said, he would look in the mirror every single morning and ask himself this one question. If today were the last day of my life, would I want to do what I'm about to do today? And whenever the answer was no for too many days in a row, he knew it was time to change something.
And listen, this wasn't just some abstract philosophical idea for him. About a year before he gave this speech, he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. The doctors did a biopsy, and the news was grim. They told him it was almost certainly a type of cancer that was terminal. His doctor's advice? He had 3 to 6 months to live, and he should go home and get his affairs in order, which, as Jobs points out, is basically doctor speak for prepare to die.
Well, as it turned out, he had an incredibly rare form of pancreatic cancer that was actually treatable with surgery. So he had the surgery, and he survived. But that experience, being that close to death, it just cemented this core belief for him. His big takeaway? Remembering you are going to die is the best way I know to avoid the trap of thinking you have something to lose. Because when you face that reality, all the external expectations, all the pride, all the fear of embarrassment or failure, it all just falls away. You're already naked, as he put it. There is absolutely no reason not to follow your heart.
And that experience really sharpened his message for everyone. First, your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life. Second, don't get trapped by dogma, which he defined as just living with the results of other people's thinking. And finally, and most importantly, have the courage to follow your heart and your intuition. He believed that somehow they already know what you truly want to become.
So you've got these 3 huge stories, one about trust, one about love, and one about death. And they all build up to one final, iconic message. It was a phrase he saw on the back of a publication called the Whole Earth Catalog when he was young, and it basically became his wish for himself and for everyone else.
Just 4 simple words that pretty much wrap up his entire philosophy. Stay hungry, stay foolish. That was his wish for himself, always, and it was the final wish he left with all those graduating students.
But what does that actually mean? Well, stay hungry, that's about never being satisfied. Always having that hunger to do more, to create something new, to achieve the next thing. And stay foolish, that's about being willing to learn, always. It means not thinking you know everything. Because the minute you think you do, you stop learning anything new. It's this really powerful mix of relentless ambition on one hand and deep humility on the other.
And so all of this brings us right back to the question that Jobs left for those graduates and now for us. After hearing these stories about trusting the dots, about love and loss, about facing mortality, we're left with this final, powerful question. What is your heart and your intuition telling you to do? Because according to Steve Jobs, you should listen, really listen, because somehow they already know what you truly want to become.